Hello, folks. Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA. Sitting alongside me today, my trusted co-host, David Simpson, 20-year veteran, legendary street cop, undercover cop, SWAT cop, homicide detective. David, welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here. Good one.
So we have a special guest today, David. We have Matt Rich Esquire, the attorney for the Rochester Police Locust Club. That is the union that represents the hardworking men and women, the officers of the Rochester Police Department. Matt, we welcome you to your pod. Welcome to the pod, brother.
Oh, what an honor to be here, Johnny. Thrilled.
Well, we appreciate it. We know that you're super busy, especially today. We really wanted to focus on, for those that are not familiar in the Rochester community in Rochester, New York, and those that listen to us in different parts of the country, we're focusing today on an organization called the Police Accountability Board. And the Police Accountability Board is exactly what it is. I'm going to read their mission statement, and we're going to get into why we're talking about them today. But to give you an idea of who they are, I'm going to read right from their website. They say that their mission, set by an overwhelming majority of Rochester voters, is to ensure public accountability and transparency over the powers exercised by sworn officers of the Rochester Police Department. Our vision, set by the community members who serve on the board, is to reimagine public safety. To understand how we achieve our mission and our vision, you'll need to understand our history, our values, and our work. So they basically have a board of directors, and then they have a staff underneath them. Matt, we wanted you to come on today because although the Police Accountability Board claims that they do work for the community, there was a lawsuit that was filed by the police union and successfully won in the New York State Court of Appeals some years ago that basically said the collective bargaining unit, the contract between the city of Rochester and the Rochester Police Locust Club, which is what the police union is called, have no standing relative to discipline in anything relating to officers of the Rochester Police Department. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less. So, number one, go Bills. That's first and foremost today. Number two, I want both of you to know that I did see the third co-host today.
Okay.
He made time to come to my office at the Locust Club and steal a breakfast sandwich from me. No, he did not pay for it. So, but he enjoyed that.
Shocking.
Don't tell the PAB.
Sure you're shocked, but no. So yeah, you basically got it right, Johnny. So basically what the Court of Appeals said in that lawsuit, and number one, you got to realize Court of Appeals, highest court in the state of New York. We kind of name our courts in a weird way. The lowest level trial court is called the Supreme Court, which is not the way it is for most of the country. So our highest court in New York is the Court of Appeals. And specifically what they said is that the portion of the charter for the PAB that's in the city charter pertaining to discipline is invalid. That's the word they used, based on a combination of laws, some of which were passed by city council years ago, which basically is that discipline is exclusively falls under the collective bargaining between the Locust Club and the city of Rochester. So the PAB, as much as their mission statement might wish it otherwise, has no role in police discipline. That's what that is.
Yeah. So just to walk it back for a second, they hide behind the fact, and the statement is, and I want to read it again, that basically it was voted on by the Rochester community. It was a proposition vote. It was a prop vote that they put on the agenda some years ago. It was almost like a quote unquote popularity contest with prom king and queen in high school.
They had to do a vote because it was changing the city charter. So essentially the constitution for the city. Right.
But I had never, and correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why I said about the vote, they never once came out and talked about how it would have been a violation of the collective bargaining agreement, the contract that had been in place for decades with the union that you represent, the Rochester Police Union, the Locust Club, and the city of Rochester. That is such a gigantic hurdle to overcome because in the contract, again, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but it says pretty clearly in sum and substance, anything that leads to discipline needs to be negotiated by the police union and the city of Rochester. This is clearly what they're trying to achieve is a disciplinary arm in the city of Rochester, but the biggest hurdle is they can't get over the union contract. It's already in place.
That's in a nutshell. I mean, what's been collectively bargained between the city and the union is that police discipline is the responsibility of the chief, The chief delegates the power to investigate disciplinary matters to the professional standards section, which is our internal affairs unit of our PD. Internal affairs PSS makes a recommendation to the chief, and then the chief decides on discipline. And then if the union disagrees about the chief's decision, there's ways to challenge that through what's called an Article 75 hearing. And there's other ways to go with that, but there's a whole system here set up that stacks layers where there are checks and balances about how all this is supposed to work. Beyond that, the decision about who the chief of police is belongs to the mayor. So the chief of police is responsible to the mayor, and the mayor is responsible to the voters of the city of Rochester. That's how this works.
Right. And the reason why we're having the pod today is because they continue, even though they don't have any teeth, they don't even have a seat at the table relative to discipline. I use the term they went rogue. They continued. I mean, they have I think last time I checked, like a $5 million budget. They have offices in the heart of the city of Rochester. They do campaigns to try to get people to proactively come in and make complaints against the officers. And there's already systems in place for that. But they continue to go rogue relative to what they're trying to do to get complaints on our officers. And I say our officers because I wear the home jersey of the RPD always. However, recently, the reason why we're having this pod is they were supposed to have a press conference today, and they were supposed to drop all the reports, all their quote-unquote investigations that they allegedly had done relative to investigations that they conducted. And now they also had findings on those investigations. Is that correct, Matt?
Both of you retired at the rank of investigator. Am I correct?
Right.
Yes, sir.
How many years and how many conferences and how many continuing education seminars and other things of that nature, how many cases did you guys have to work to earn that title? Probably untold.
Thousands.
Yeah.
You can't just call yourself investigator and make it so. All right. So you have untrained people with no law enforcement background whatsoever accessing information that does not give a complete picture. It's a portion of the information. And then even in cases where the complainant doesn't follow up, because there's one of those where they said we went back to talk to the complainant and they didn't want to talk to us any further, and we didn't have complete information, then we're going to make a recommendation to sanction this officer in a career-altering way. That's what people have to realize. If an officer gets suspended from duty, that is a mark on them for the rest of their career. And for the slightest of infractions, there's one particular case that I'll talk about in a minute, but for the slightest of infractions, not turning on a body camera for a moment and then turning it back on, or any number of things, essentially what they would like to see happen is, frankly, most of the patrol division suspended. Who's going to police this city when most of the patrol division on any given night is suspended? And one of the reports, it's just comical to me. It was essentially, the complaint was that a hearing impaired motorist in an accident was not provided with a sign language interpreter. Therefore, that's the fault of the responding officer. I'm certainly not going to mention any names, but let me tell you how incomplete the recitation of those facts was. Because I worked on that case. It went to PSS, it was reviewed, and it was found to be unfounded. But that particular officer wrote down word for word in writing to the hearing impaired person, this is who you call, this is the number you give them in terms of the accident report, here is the accident report, apologize for not having a sign language interpreter available on staff at that point that they could call. And then because the motorist vehicle was disabled, that particular officer gave that motorist, the hearing impaired motorist, a ride home. Does that sound like somebody that needs to be suspended for lack of resources that are allocated? I can think of a lot better ways to spend $5 million, Johnny. Yeah. One of them may be hiring a couple, sign language interpreters to have on staff and available on 24-hour basis. But, here we are. It's you take some subset of the facts because you have an agenda about how you wish to see this interpreted. You then make a recommendation that you're not qualified to make, that is not from an unbiased source. It's from a biased, agenda-driven source, and that's who staffs the PAB. And I don't mean to personally denigrate anybody that works there, but you don't work there because you're a supporter of law enforcement. You work
Or even
there
impartial.
Right, not impartial at all. You work there because you think law enforcement is the root of all the
Or the
problems
devil.
in the city of Rochester. And, I mean, it's ironic. In the middle of this, I saw something the other day that jumped out at me. You want to talk about root causes? The pervasive absentee rate among middle and high schoolers in the Rochester City School District exceeds 50% on a daily basis.
Mhm.
You tell me if that's one of the problems we ought to be addressing, or it's the lack of accountability on part of the Rochester Police Department that's really driving all of this. If you're a reasonable person, you have to laugh at that. So that's where we are.
Matt, they did. I read all the report. That's a release. Like, just because they didn't have the press conference, I mean, they violated the terms of the city charter, right? By just having it put out there. It's on Twitter. It's all over the place.
I mean, it's not. That's just not just my opinion. I mean, basically, the way this went is this has been sort of coming for weeks, but they initially went to the city law department and said, "Can we do this?" And they were told, "No, you can't." That switched sometime in the last 10 days or so to, "We are going to do this." And the city law department again told them, "No, you're not. You're not allowed to do it." Then they went out and hired another lawyer outside of their organization to give them the opinion they wanted. And that's what they're hanging their hat on. So, any other department of the city, the lawyer that represents you is the city law department, corporation counsel. That's who, if you're, Department of Environmental Services or the Recreation Department, whatever the case may be, you have a legal issue, it is handled by corporation counsel. The PAB's lawyers should be corporation counsel, yet somehow they've been budgeted to have 3 of their own lawyers on staff. There are no other departments within city government that I'm aware of that has their own lawyers. Yet somehow the PAB has 3. And, we call that, in my business, we call it forum shopping, which is you go around and you pick the judge that's going to give you the answer that you want. And what the city charter says is they're entitled to release reports about statistical analysis and suggestions for improvement of processes. It says nothing about releasing disciplinary investigations or recommendations. So they're not allowed to do it, but they did it anyway.
I find that hypocrisy appalling. The fact that they're going to sit there and be judge, jury, and executioner to cops that violate the GOs of the Rochester Police Department, and they're going to be the moral authority on that, and then they're going to go and the people they work for tell them you can't do this, and they give them the middle finger, and that's okay.
I mean, it's tough because it's inside baseball, but from what I see every single day in dealing with PSS, it's unbelievable how thorough and tough those investigations can be when you have allegations that there's been a violation of the general order or some sort of other misconduct. The idea that this is some sort of free pass or something that's an easy process is nonsense. Those guys, they do a thorough investigation. They ask the hard questions, and when appropriate, they make recommendations up to the chief's office for very harsh discipline if it's warranted. Doesn't happen very often. I mean, that's the other myth, that there's some sort of pervasive and frequent misconduct among the general men and women of the Rochester Police Department. I mean, it just doesn't exist. It's a fairy tale, and some people want to wish that into existence because they think that somehow the police are the root cause of all of this. It's tough. I mean, you're just dealing with people with a completely opposite worldview than most of us would have. Police are part of the solution. I mean, the police have to be freed up to do their job in the city of Rochester to correct some of the issues that we have. And this handcuffs and discourages the men and women of law enforcement from, trying to solve the problem. I mean, we have businesses leaving. I mean, you go downtown, there's so much vacant storefront and vacant office space. It's unbelievable. There's fights outside of high schools. You can go. You guys have talked about it ad nauseum, and you think somehow that's the problem. What's causing that is the police being there.
Well, Matt, I think you hit on a really good point, because The issue is that they promote a narrative that's a false narrative, but they promote it to the residents in the city of Rochester that there's some kind of pervasive problem with the Rochester Police Department, and that's simply not true. And what it does is it sends a message to people that erodes the credibility of the department in their eyes, and that gets down to the root problems that we have of why people don't want to work with the police, why people feel like they can tell the police to go piss off, is because people like the accountability board put out things and ruin the credibility of the police department as a whole. It's not, they don't attack the individuals. They redacted that, fine. But they attack the RPD, the badge, the uniform.
I can't say any better than that, Dave. That's it.
Yeah, and the thing is, and I want to hammer this point home too. They tell our officers, you got to be forthright, which our officers, the RPD officers are, but they're saying be forthright, but they're not being forthright with the people that they're supposed to be serving. They don't even come out and say, we don't have any teeth. We don't have a seat at the table. I can't drill that point home enough. They keep putting out this narrative that they actually have some teeth or a seat at the table or a say regarding anything regarding relative to discipline with the officers of the Rochester Police Department, and they simply don't. And they keep putting it out there as if they do, and that is, to me, the most dishonest thing you could possibly do.
The only real pervasive dishonesty I'm aware of is Jason Blanchard claiming to be in a Hall of Fame somewhere.
I would agree. That's sustained, Matt. That's sustained.
Well, we say the same thing. And again, we tell our listeners all the time, topics like these that are so directly involved with not only the Rochester Police Locust Club Union, but the Rochester Police Department, which we always say Jay has to recuse himself because of that. And Matt, you and I have spoke online, offline, all over the place, but we wish Jay could be a part of this conversation because I know he'd have a lot of things to say.
I watch every episode to make sure that Jay doesn't.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that Johnny and I would be the voice of reason for Jay?
Well,
I
Mr.
never thought
Rich.
of it that way, but here we are.
Hold on, Johnny, one thing.
Okay.
I just want to say one thing on this topic. Matt hit on it. And
Okay.
I was blessed to be able to travel as a member of the Rochester Police Department. I worked in 25 different jurisdictions: New York City, Chicago, Miami, Houston, Atlanta. I've been all over. And I can say this with total honesty to anyone that's watching, that the Rochester Police Department is one of the most professional organizations in the United States, from equipment to their general orders to the men and women that do the job there. It's a unit that we wear the home jersey, but I wore it with pride, because I went to those other places and I was shocked by some of the things that I saw and the manner in which they did things, and it's not done here. And the citizens of Rochester should know that, and they should be proud of their police department.
And frankly, over the last week or so, I can't get into too many details, but they should be proud of the leadership of the Rochester Police Department. I couldn't have asked, or the officers for the Locust Club couldn't have asked for a better response from the sixth floor, even up to the mayor's office. We've been in communication with them throughout this. We've been in communication with Corporation Counsel throughout this. They've been completely forthcoming, going above and beyond, keeping us in the loop about how this was all unfolding. And the problem is that you have a rogue department of the city of Rochester government here who operates as if they don't have to answer to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's the punishment, Matt? Like, what could happen?
Well, I suspect that a referral is going to be made to the Office of Professional Integrity within the city, because basically the way that I've been explained to me is that these records are being treated as internal city records for internal personnel use only. And they've been told that's another reason why they shouldn't be releasing these. The mayor's office hopefully takes further action beyond that, but people need to understand something. PAB does not answer to the mayor's office. It answers only to city council. It is an investigative arm of city council. And of the units of government, or of the branches of government within the city, the portion of city council, and I emphasize portion, the minority of city council, is where you find the people that are most hostile to the Rochester Police Department. And again, I must emphasize that is not everybody on city council. We have members of city council who are incredibly supportive of the police, but 3 in particular are so completely biased against the Rochester Police Department that it's scary.
They're nuts.
And that's who PAB is the brainchild of, and that's who PAB answers to. So
Yeah, we know who those three are, and I'll go one step further, and I'll tell everybody, full disclosure, probably about a month ago, I reached out to the new director, and she quote unquote respectfully declined to come on the podcast. And I had, and I'm not going to name the person, but I was in contact with a person inside the Police Accountability Board who was very, very benevolent, very nice. And I had offered to that person to come on the pod. They wanted to come on the pod, but they were told no. So we had reached out in a couple different angles. The Police Accountability Board, and my answer to that person and to the staff is, hey, we have a spot. If you think that what you're doing is so right and so correct and you could defend it, here's a platform where you could reach more law enforcement people than a 10-minute soundbite on Channel 10, 13, 8, Fox, whatever it is. And if you feel like you have such a good seat at the table and you feel like you're in such good standing, come on the podcast and explain yourself. They didn't want to do that. And Matt, we know why they didn't want to do that. They don't want to do it because they know they don't have any footing or any kind of stronghold.
Johnny, let me use some of the Latin I learned at the Aquinas Institute of Rochester. Res ipsa loquitur. That means the thing speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that story you just told sums it up in a nutshell.
Yep.
Go Knights.
Well, Matt, we can't thank you enough for coming on. Let the executive officers of the Rochester Police Locust Club know that the Crime Dawg Podcast has, they have the full support of our podcast. We appreciate what they do in defending our brothers and sisters out there every day. Thank you for defending our brothers and sisters.
Yep.
And thank you. We know today was a busy day for you, and we know you carved out a 25 spot for us, and we really appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matty.
I've been waiting for this invitation. I don't think I was the first lawyer on here, which is a disturbing fact. You had Emilio on. He's a hero of mine. But what you guys are doing, the forum you were providing, is incredibly important. So, like I said, you have no more loyal viewer than me. I usually like to put the Crime Dawg Podcast on when I'm mowing the lawn, get it on the headphones, get it going, hear the dulcet tones of the content creator. But no, in all seriousness, guys, thank you for what you do. Call upon me or Paul or Jeff or Kevin at any time, and we'll be there in an instant. Okay.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks, you, Matt.
All right, go Bills. Talk to you guys soon.
Right. See you, brother. So, David, you know what the interesting part is that when we're talking about police work and we talk about investigations, which you and I did for a very long time. Matt, which I wasn't going to. I know he had to go to court, so I didn't want to take up too much of his time. But our background is extensive. I mean, they just don't up one day and the chief doesn't come over your desk like it's 1950, go, hey, kid, you did a good job. Here's your gold shield. It doesn't work like that. And at the end of the day, when you talk about the extensive background investigations that you and I had done, we focused on weapons traffickers all over the country. We focused on drug traffickers bringing large quantities of drugs to this area. You were assigned to homicide as a homicide detective. I was never in that unit, but man, did I work so many homicide cases with our brothers and sisters that work up in that unit. The extensive background that you and I have relative to investigations, you can't even write a book about it because the book would be 52 feet high, along with all our brothers and sisters from years past that were investigators and the ones that are currently investigators on a job. You can't write a book for them either because it would be huge. And to have a forum or to have an organization with people that are just getting quote unquote training, there's not even a person or persons they're advising. I went on their board of directors website. There's nobody there from any law enforcement background. It's amazing to me because that's like me, and I've said it before.
We're the devil.
Well, I said it before. It's like me just walking into the University of Rochester, which is one of the premier medical centers in the world. It's like me walking in there and kicking a door in during one of Dr. Mauer's surgeries that he's going to do on somebody's brain and go, da, 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 da. Hey, doc, I don't think you should cut there.
I'm a doctor today.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how people think that they have a seat at the table relative to investigations, and they have zero experience doing it. You know, you watch CSI Miami 300 episodes and you think you're a detective. It ain't happening.
Nancy Drew. You read Nancy Drew, and now you're a homicide detective.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's just amazing, you know, and what really shocks me is
Johnny,
that,
didn't you hear? Anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Anyone can be the lead on a homicide. Anyone can write a wiretap and take down a drug cartel. Anyone can do it.
Yeah. And it's amazing that they continue. And I want to say it again and again. All the PAB does, the Police Accountability Board, all they have done was mislead the good people in the Rochester, New York community. They're giving them this false hope, this false flag, this false narrative that they actually have a seat at the table. And I can't say it enough. They don't. They don't. And it's being perpetuated by those members of city council who have an axe to grind with officers for some reason. And it's perpetuated through them. And the line and the vitriol that is spewed regarding the officers of the Rochester Police Department is disgusting, because it's not true. Because Chief Smith and Matt Rich mentioned PSS, folks. What he mentioned was that's professional standards section. Old school, it's called internal affairs. Dave Smith has an internal affairs department.
We both been through it.
Right.
So we know firsthand.
Right. So Dave Smith has internal affairs. Dave Smith, the chief of the Rochester Police Department, oversees all of those investigations. So there is already an arm inside the Rochester Police Department. And there's so much accountability. You think for 3 seconds that Dave Smith's going to put his job or the officers that work in those units in jeopardy because they're trying to skew a case or submarine a case to save a cop's job? They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. And basically, that's what the Police Accountability Board, David, is saying. You can't trust the cops to do their own investigation, which they've done for years. It's amazing what they spew, the vitriol, the venom that they spew. It's disgusting. It disgusts me. And this continues to happen. And I'll tell you another thing. 8, 10, 13. I want to see from our local media. I want our local media to go out there and say, hey, why, the Crime Dawg Podcast says you don't have a seat at the table. Why don't you tell anybody that you don't have a seat at the table? They won't do it.
Why were they going to show up for this press conference? That press conference should have not one reporter at it. It's a joke. It's not news. It's a joke. Why are they showing up? But they're showing up because you know why? Because the media is in bed with that liberal side of things, and they will put out any narrative that slanders the cops or attacks the police because it gets clicks.
Well, and listen, full disclosure, they were supposed to have a press conference at Daniel Prude Square, which is at Martin Luther King Park. We sent our
Prude Park. I mean, get them.
We sent some people there. We were waiting to see if the press conference was going to happen. We don't know if it was because of the inclement weather in Rochester this morning, but there was no press conference. And we were all over their Twits page, and there was nothing to be found on it. They posted something 2 minutes before we recorded this podcast that they had something that they were going to release their findings. But I don't know if they ended up having their press conference, if it got relocated. I don't know. I don't know what happened to it.
Daniel Prude.
So
that's a whole nother podcast.
Well, this is a podcast on what's going on at the Police Accountability Board. We're having another pod, as you know. We've been prepping for months because we're the real investigators. We've been prepping for months. We've been reviewing reports. We've been collecting data, statistical data that we are going to compare and contrast. We're doing what we do best, and that's investigations. So we're going to do a whole other pod dedicated to the Police Accountability Board, which is why we reached out to the director, and she doesn't want to come on,
Right. Well, then one of the big things, Johnny, and just throw this out towards the Police Accountability Board, the first rule of thumb with an investigator during an investigation is you don't have a preconceived hypothesis going into it, okay? Yeah. You don't go in predetermined that the police are bad. Yeah. You go in objective and you follow the evidence systematically, and it leads you where you have to go. The evidence takes you there. You don't find evidence to support the hypothesis. You find evidence to lead you to the conclusion. That's the difference. Yeah. That's the difference between a real investigator and a fake investigator. And the investigators that go in with a preconceived notion that have a predetermined outcome in mind are finding ways to make their outcome come true. And that is the exact opposite of a fair and impartial fact finder investigator. Thank you.
Well, very well said. Well, you know what they always say? Okay, we got the person. Now let's go find the crime. That's what
Right.
they're doing to the RPD cops.
Oh, yeah.
They have the persons,
Right.
and now they're trying to find the allegation or the wrongdoing that they could just throw on somebody. It's
Johnny,
ridiculous.
if their phone rings, when they pick up that phone and someone has a complaint, they're looking to substantiate that complaint by any means necessary.
Look at when you have festivals in Rochester and one of the booths is the Police Accountability Board.
Right.
You set
Sign
up
up for a complaint.
tablecloth. Yeah, you set up a tablecloth and you staff it with people.
You get a free hat for filing a complaint. I'm probably they don't have gift cards. It's probably not handing out gift cards to file complaints.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Got to spend that $5 million.
Well, you know what? You talk about us as investigators. If we did 1/10 of the way they're trying to do their business, if we did 1/10 of what they did, we would be suspended or fired for the way they're trying to conduct their investigations.
Well, yeah, an investigation would be 5 minutes long.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Well, David, thanks for sticking by.
Yes, sir.
Jay Blanch, we miss you, brother. We know why you can't be here because of the hot topic, but we do that to insulate you. You know that. We all know that. Our subscribers know that. Folks, you can find us on our YouTube channel at Crime Dawg Podcast. Once you're there, you can hit on the plethora of library of episodes that we have, or you can go to our website, thecrimedogpodcast.com, and it will also redirect you to our YouTube page. You could sign up, like, and subscribe. Please, that's very important. Like and subscribe to all of our podcasts. Check everything out. Please, please, please. That's how we stay afloat. But hey, we appreciate you listening to this podcast, and thank you for listening. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?